They say silence is golden. In my line of work, silence is where the bodies are buried, sometimes figuratively, sometimes not. It's where truth hides, sealed under dates, case numbers, and the polite language of reports. Truth festers there, like an infection under a bandage no one wants to peel back. For 35 years, I've worked records division for the Chicago Police Department. My name is Evelyn Vance. I'm 59. To most of the building, I'm a shadow with a key ring, the woman in the basement who manages archives, who smells faintly of old paper and dust, who gets asked for a file and then forgotten before the elevator doors even close. That's the mistake people make. They forget the archivist sees everything. I know which officers misplaced evidence in 1998. I know which alderman's nephew got a hit and run, smoothed into an unfortunate misunderstanding in 2005. I've held the city's darkest secrets in cardboard boxes stacked on metal shelves, neatly labeled like the world can be tamed by ink. I never thought I'd use those secrets. Never thought I'd weaponize invisibility. Not until winter of 2023, when the silence I feared most came from my own daughter. This is not a story about the law. The law is a cold machine, rigid, official, and often sharpest on the people it claims to protect. This is a story about justice. And I learned the hard way that justice is something you sometimes have to take with your own hands, especially when someone you love is being erased one small piece at a time by a man who thinks he's untouchable. Before the nightmare, my life had a soundtrack, the cello. Maya. My Maya was a musician from the time she was 6. Our little bungalow in Rogers Park pulsed with her practice. Deep, resonant notes that vibrated the windows and made our tiny kitchen feel like a concert hall. She was color and sound. She laughed with her whole body. She wore bright scarves and vintage coats and looked at the world not as it was, but as it could be. I raised her alone after my husband died. Hardest thing I ever did. Most rewarding, too. We were a team, survivors. Then came the gala, a charity event for the arts, champagne flowing like water, air heavy with perfume and old money. Maya performed with her quartet, glowing beneath stage lights like she belonged to something bigger than struggle. That's where she met Julian Thorne. Julian was 34, 8 years older than Maya, an investment banker and partner at a top firm in the Loop. Handsome in that sharp, predatory way. Tailored suits, a jawline like a blade, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He swept her off her feet with the efficiency of a corporate takeover, exotic orchids instead of roses, private viewings at the Art Institute, dinners where everyone seemed to orbit him. I tried to be happy. Every mother wants her child secure, loved. But the first time I met him dinner at a downtown steakhouse, I felt a prickle at the back of my neck. The waiter came, and before Maya could speak, Julian closed her menu with 2 fingers and said, "She'll have the salmon, sauce on the side, and bring us the Cabernet." Maya blushed like it was romance. Later, she told me, "He takes such good care of me, Mom. He knows exactly what I like." He didn't ask. That was the first crack, the hairline fracture in the foundation. They were married 6 months later in a lavish ceremony at the Botanical Gardens. Everything looked perfect: flowers, glass, sunlight, the sort of elegance that makes people sigh and call it a dream. But as I watched my daughter walk down the aisle, something inside me went cold. Maya wasn't wearing her bright colors. The dress was Julian's choice. Sleek, modern, severe. It fit her like a statement someone else wanted to make, and she wasn't playing her cello. Julian had suggested she take a break from performing just for a while to focus on setting up their home. The control didn't arrive like a slap. It came like water, slow, patient, wearing down stone. First they moved into a penthouse in the Gold Coast, miles from our Rogers Park bungalow and the familiar routes of our lives. Then Sunday dinners, our sacred tradition, became hard to schedule. Maya's excuses multiplied, her voice thinning over the phone. "We're busy, Mom. Julian has a trip. We've got an event. I'm not feeling great." When I did see her, she looked curated. The color drained out of her wardrobe, beige, gray, cream, like someone had edited her. Her wild curls were straightened, pulled into a tight chignon. She looked polished, expensive, like a trophy placed carefully on a shelf. And she checked her phone constantly, a reflex that felt less like habit and more like permission-seeking. The first time I saw the mark, it was October. Chicago wind had started its ugly work, knifing through coats and turning corners into traps. I insisted we meet for coffee near her building. She arrived 15 minutes late, oversized sunglasses on, a high-neck cashmere sweater, despite the heat inside the cafe. Fragile, like a bird built out of hollow bones. We sat in a corner. She reached for her latte and her sleeve rode up. There it was. Bruises blooming dark purple on her forearm, distinct as fingerprints, a grip, a hard, violent grip. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might vomit. I reached across the table and caught her hand. "Maya," I whispered, my heart hammering. "What is that?" She yanked away like I'd burned her. Her sleeve snapped down, aggressive. "It's nothing, I bumped into the kitchen island." "You have never been clumsy in your life," I said, voice rising despite myself. "You're a cellist. You have the most precise hands I've ever seen." She hissed, "Shh, Mom, stop. You're making a scene." "I don't care about a scene. I care about you." I leaned in. "Julian did this, didn't he?" Maya stared into her coffee as if answers lived at the bottom, shoulders hunched. "You don't understand. He's under a lot of pressure. The market is volatile. He gets stressed." Her words came out rehearsed, like lines from a play everyone hated but still performed. "He didn't mean to. I provoked him. I was nagging him. It was my fault." It was the script. The universal script of the abused. I'd read it in thousands of reports tucked into my basement shelves like tragic duplicates. "Maya," I said, forcing calm, "love does not leave bruises. Love does not make you afraid to speak." She stood so abruptly her chair scraped. "I have to go. Julian's expecting me." She didn't look at me when she said it. She didn't look at me when she left. She disappeared into the gray crowd outside, swallowed by Chicago's winter sky. I sat alone with my cold coffee thick as sludge, realizing my daughter was drowning and I was on shore screaming into wind that didn't care. The months that followed blurred into anxiety. I called daily. She rarely answered. When she did, her voice sounded distant, robotic, as if someone else might be listening. I went to the precinct and found Detective Miller, good man. Tired eyes, 2 decades of shared hell. He listened, then sighed. "Evelyn, you know the drill. Without a formal complaint from her, without cooperation, our hands are tied. And Julian Thorne? He's got lawyers who cost more an hour than I make in a month." "I know what I saw," I snapped. Miller nodded, softer. "Then keep a log. Document everything. These guys escalate. And when she's ready to run, she'll need you to be the landing pad." So I waited. And I dug. I spent my nights in the archives long after the building emptied, when the fluorescent lights hummed like insects and the silence pressed close. On paper, Julian Thorne was spotless. No arrests, no tickets, no public stains. A pillar donor lists, gala photos, smiling, beside people who believed money meant virtue. But I knew where respectability liked to hide its rot. I searched sealed records and cross-referenced old domestic disturbance calls from the affluent district's places where violence wore designer shoes and the reports read like apologies. That's when I found it. A 911 call from 10 years earlier. A penthouse in the Loop. A woman named Sarah Jenkins. The responding officers noted a broken nose and a dislocated shoulder. No charges. The report said she declined to prosecute and claimed she fell down the stairs. The boyfriend listed at the residence, Julian Thorne. He wasn't a stressed husband who lost control. He was a pattern, a predator who thrived on control. Winter deepened. Sidewalk snow turned gray and slushy like the city itself was bruising. Maya's silence became deafening. She missed Christmas, texted that they were skiing in Aspen. But I checked flight manifests, a quiet perk of a life spent around systems, and saw no tickets in their names. They were in the penthouse. He was keeping her there. The breaking point came in February, Tuesday night, bitter cold. My phone rang at 2 a.m. "Mom." A whisper broken by sobs. "I'm in the bathroom. He went crazy. Maya, where are you?" I sat up so fast the room tilted. "He didn't like the pasta dish. He threw the plate, then he—" Her breath hitched. "He choked me, Mom. I thought I was going to die." My hand clamped around the phone until my knuckles screamed. "Get out, right now!" "I can't. He took my keys, locked the door, and hid the passkey. He's asleep. But if he wakes—" Panic cracked her voice. "No, don't come. He bought a gun. Says it's for protection. It's on the nightstand." The line cut. Battery. Fear. Either way, I was left staring into the dark with a daughter trapped behind a rich man's door. Panic is useless. Panic gets people killed. I forced air into my lungs until my brain did what it has always done. Catalog. Connect. Solve. I couldn't storm a penthouse where a violent man had a gun. I needed leverage. I needed to neutralize him before I touched that door. I drove to the precinct, not the front desk, the basement, my territory. I pulled Sarah Jenkins' file and made copies. Then I opened a box marked pending. The kind of box meant to disappear if someone with power asked nicely. Financial Crimes had been investigating a laundering scheme tied to major firms. Political pressure had stalled it, but the raw materials were still there. Preliminary wiretaps, transfers, photos, coded emails. Julian's name lived on the edges like a stain you only see in certain light. 3 hours. That's all it took to turn suspicion into structure. Offshore accounts, transfers that didn't match salaries, messages that pretended to be business but reeked of fraud. I built a dossier not just a wife-beater, but a felon with a fragile empire. At 6 a.m., I drove to the Gold Coast. The doorman tried to block me. I flashed my civilian CPD badge, official enough if you don't look too hard, and said family emergency. He let me up. Outside the mahogany door, I heard nothing. I rang the bell and held my finger there until it became a demand. Julian opened wearing a silk robe, annoyance arranged neatly on his face. "Evelyn, do you have any idea what time it is? Where is my daughter?" "She's sleeping. She's not well. Leave." I pushed past him. He grabbed my arm, iron hard. I said leave. "Call the police," I told him, calm as a file label. "I'm sure they'll love to see what's in my bag." I walked into the pristine living room and saw the patch of fresh paint by the kitchen where a plate had hit the wall. I called Maya's name. She stumbled out, scarf wrapped tight around her neck. One eye swollen shut, lips split. The sight of her turned my heart into debris. Julian moved between us like a wall. "She fell in the shower," he said smoothly. "She's been drinking. You know how she gets." Rewriting reality in real time. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I lifted my phone and snapped a photo. His sneer, his stance, the sterile wealth behind him, and in the blur, my daughter beaten and silent. "What are you doing?" he demanded, confused for the first time. "Sending a text." "To who? Your sewing circle?" He laughed. "To Detective Miller, to Financial Crimes, to the FBI contact I've known since 1995. I hit send. Attached. The photo, Sarah Jenkins' report, and the most incriminating documents from the laundering file. The message read, "Domestic assault in progress. Suspect, Julian Thorne. Flight risk, financial evidence attached." Julian's smile cracked. His phone started ringing boss, lawyer, unknown numbers. He ignored them until the sound outside changed. A distant wail growing fast, sirens threading through city canyons. He went to the window. 6 squad cars, unmarked units. He turned to me, face pale. "What did you do?" "I did what the system couldn't do fast enough," I said softly. "I burned your world down." The pounding on the door shook the walls. "Police, open up!" Julian looked at Maya, pleading. "Tell them you fell. Tell them it's a mistake." Maya touched her swollen eye. Then she walked to me, took my hand and said nothing because sometimes silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's the moment you stop lying for someone else. The door burst open, chaos vests shouting, weapons drawn. Detective Miller was first in. He took one look at Maya and his face went hard. "Julian Thorne," he said, "you are under arrest." Julian screamed about rights, lawsuits, connections, but as they dragged him past gathered neighbors, he looked small. Finished. I wrapped my coat around Maya. "Let's go home," I told her. Back in Rogers Park, she sat on her childhood bed beside the cello she hadn't touched in months, and she finally wept ugly, primal, alive. The war didn't end that day. Courtrooms came, smears, testimony. Sarah Jenkins eventually stood and broke the pattern open for the jury to see. But the verdict did come, guilty. And one evening, long after the headlines faded, I heard a low, mournful note from the living room, then another. Then a jagged melody, raw as winter turning into spring. Maya was playing again. 3 years later, she teaches music to at-risk kids and tells them their voices matter. I'm still in the basement, still invisible to most, but I understand the weight of what I keep. Silence can be golden, sure, but truth is what you dig out with your bare hands before the quiet swallows someone you love.